and go ahead and turn it over to Lisa.
Right. Well, welcome again. I think this is my third time. Is it third or fourth? I don't know. It's getting a little bit easier as I'm going along. But today, or this month, I'm doing these monthly. And so today we're just going to talk about what we need to do to decrease our chance of recurrence of breast cancer. All right. So these are some of the things, some guidelines out there, and just some helpful hints. And I'm going to hopefully debunk some of those myths out there as well, because there's a whole plethora of myths. I'm sure everyone has heard them all. You go to Dr. Google and you can get a million things not to do or what to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to streamline everything. We're going to make it as simple as we possibly can. It does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be hard. So I'm taking all this information from the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Cancer Society. And these are some of the things that they are currently recommending for our breast cancer survivors. And I do very simple PowerPoints. If you've been with me before, these are very simple. I want you to listen to the information instead of reading every word. So we're going to go over some things. If you have questions, just stop. I mean, you can type them in and I'll gladly stop or go back. And I know somebody had emailed some questions in already, and I'm hoping I'm going to cover all of them. And if I don't, Aurelis, can you kind of streamline me? Because I didn't write them down. I forgot to write them down, but I think they're incorporated within. So we'll go ahead and start. So I think we've all heard this before, and I've said this a million times probably, is that we need to increase our consumption of fruits and vegetables. All right, we don't have to be completely plant-based, but a larger portion of our plate and a larger portion of what we consume should be from plants. And particularly we're talking about fruits and vegetables right now, just because fruits and vegetables have those hidden nutrients, the nutrients that we don't really focus on most of the time, and those are our phytonutrients. You know, we know that fruits and vegetables are very high in our vitamins and fiber. Fiber is important, but those vitamins. And so, you know, I ask people like, what do we know for an orange? You know, an orange is known for vitamin C, or a banana. A banana is, you know, potassium. So I ask them, like, what is an apple or watermelon? And they're like, well, watermelon is just water and an apple is nothing. But they all have those phytonutrients that I'm speaking of, and those are what give them the color. And so those phytonutrients have the potential to actually help us save us from heart disease and certain types of cancer. All right. So when we talk about eating vegetables, and you know, I sometimes have to beg people to eat fruits and vegetables. And some people are like, I don't like fruit, but I don't like vegetables. As long as we get some either or. All right. Fruit has more calories per serving than vegetables do, but we can talk about that in another completely different lecture. But the important thing is to get a color, all right, to get as much color on your plate as you possibly can. You know, if you love broccoli, broccoli is great. Broccoli is a superfood, but if you only eat broccoli, you're only gonna get those nutrients from that broccoli. So let's venture out and have cauliflower, or let's venture out and, oh my gosh, I'm gonna say a potato, even a white potato, which everyone's so afraid of white foods these days, which should not be, especially in the fruit and vegetable world. So cauliflower and potatoes and all of those things are important for us. They all give us different phytonutrients. So we're going to aim for about 2.5 cups of vegetables a day and 2 cups of fruit. So real easy to keep things so super easy. I tell people with every meal we should have a fruit serving. Okay, every meal. And so that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Obviously, if we want to throw one in as our snack, we can do that. And vegetables, you know, we can incorporate them at breakfast. We absolutely certainly can. You know, avocado, you see that on the picture, is really a vegetable kind of fruit, but that can be incorporated in the morning. And that's your great monounsaturated fats. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So, but vegetables in the morning are onions in an omelet, or green pepper or mushrooms. Those are all, and they're all encompassing in all these, our servings. So 2.5 cups of vegetables, I think, are very easy to attain, very easy. A serving, you know, is a 1/2 cup. You know, a cup of steamed broccoli is nothing, I think. So it's very easily to pull that in. So first and foremost, our plate should really be mostly fruits and vegetables. Okay, so that's one thing that we can all do. That helps with every disease state out there. So that's going to be one thing we're going to do. And the other thing,
Lisa.
Yes. Okay.
Before you move on, just a couple of questions.
Yes.
On the fruits and vegetables. Yes. Is there diminished value, nutritional value, if it's peeled?
Well, all right, depending on what the peel is. Yeah, well, we're not going to eat a peel on an orange or a banana, though you can, though I don't recommend it. But as a very good question. So if we have, say, an apple maybe, and we're peeling that apple, what we're missing, there are some nutrients in the peel, but mostly it's the fiber. That fiber is more of your insoluble fiber, which your roughage. And so we'll be losing that. It's just like when we juice everything, you know, and we get, everyone's like, I juice and I throw in all these different berries and everything, but all the fiber gets thrown out at the end. So we're not really consuming the fiber. And fiber content is actually something that will help decrease risk of colon cancer. And we need that fiber. So the peel does have some nutrient value, but mostly it's the fiber that we're going to be throwing away.
Okay, and one more question before we move on. Okay. What about the prepackaged bags of lettuce and greens? Is that still nutritious?
Yeah, yes, it is. We always recommend that we wash everything, even though it says it's washed 3 times, you know, 3 times and it's ready to eat. I never trust that, because it was at one point clean and safe. But as the transport, you know, we think people touch it, people cough on it, things drip on it. So even if it's pre-bagged, we need to wash it. Ideally, you know, the more processing, the more chopping that happens in the front end, nutrients will leach out of that. And then, you know, in the back end. So if we can get everything, you know, a big whole head of romaine lettuce and then chop that ourselves, that's fine. But I know that we're all busy, and those prepackaged are perfect. They're perfect for busy people. A lot of it doesn't, I mean, it's not zero nutrient, you know, it doesn't end at 0. So we still have some nutrient value in it. So that's an excellent question. You're welcome. All right. So this isn't with food, but this is physical activity. These are the things that are the top of the list. All right. So when I meet with people and I ask, you know, do you exercise? And they're like, I don't like to exercise, but it's incredibly important. And it doesn't mean, exercise does not mean that you have to go run a marathon. It does not mean that it has to be painful, and does not mean that you have to hate it. Exercise is something that you like, that's out there. It's not just because you work a very physically active job doesn't mean that counts as your physical activity, because that's your job. We need you to be above and beyond. And so that there's actually been studies and research shown that physical activity does decrease your chance for recurrence. So get out there. These women are running on the beach, and I'm jealous, but aim for about 150 minutes per week. If you do more, that's great. But that's what we're aiming for. We should get out there. They're really what they want you to do. They want you to be more active than inactive. All right, inactivity. If we are at a desk job all day long, and then we go home and we make our dinner, and then we're sitting down, relaxing, watching television, that's a lot of inactivity. We're moving from place to place, but we need to get out there and actually get moving. So planning, you know, if we work and we have a desk job, you know, get there 15 minutes early and walk around the office for 15 minutes. Stay after work 15 minutes and walk, or at lunch, walk 10 minutes. So try to just aim for getting the 150 minutes in if we can. And that's really easy to do in a week's time if we break it up. You don't have to do it all at once. All right. So I always ask if we've not been physically active, and generally after breast cancer, after that treatment, I mean, we're zapped. I mean, we are, you know, we could have been marathon runners prior to, and now we're like, what do I do? And so we always start slow. It doesn't matter. We drill in our brain sometimes like, well, I used to be able to, and we just think of that as our baseline. But what we need to do is start from 10 minutes at a time and build up from that, rather than saying, you know, I used to run an hour at a time and go out there and try to run an hour. So that's just setting yourself up for injury. So slow and gradual. Of course, we have to have our approval from our physicians if we've had any surgery. But I always encourage physical activity during treatment even. That helps with that horrific fatigue that we experience both with radiation and chemotherapy. So exercise, getting that blood pumping, getting that heart working is important. Because breast cancer survivors do have a higher chance of cardiovascular disease on the back end. So exercise is going to help keep that heart muscle healthy. So fruits and vegetables and physical activity. All right. Obesity is one that does increase our chance of recurrence. All right. So we really hone in on this. Now, I don't want the total focus. I don't want us to get completely worried and afraid. I always recommend If we have gained weight, and a lot of times we do gain weight with some of the breast cancer treatment, but if we have gained weight, you know, and we have that pressure on us, you know, we're on tamoxifen and our weight keeps going up. The thing that we have to remember at the back end of all this, these are recommendations. We can be over our BMI and still be healthy. So that's what I focus mostly on is the healthiness. We can be at a higher weight and still be healthy. So physically active, we can eat our fruits and vegetables, we can avoid some of these other things that we're talking about. So I don't always put all my eggs in one basket as far as with obesity. Now what we're talking about is that adiposity in our midsection. I know this is not like this picture, everyone's like, oh my gosh, but that's what we're talking about. So we're looking at our waist circumference mostly. And so the 31.5 inches and that's in the cancer world for a female, that's what we want you to try to strive for, all right? If you're like, I will never get to 31.5, that's okay, but we're gonna try to shrink. We're gonna try to shrink you from what you are. So we said I always recommend taking your waist circumference, doing what we need to do, and then we come on the back end and measure it again. If your waist is over 31.5, you know, that doesn't mean you're doomed. What that means is we just need to be healthy on the back end. So that increased weight, especially around midsection, is what we're really focusing on. We're talking about adiposity. All right, now
question.
Yes. With this?
Yes, with that one there. So 31 and a half inches compared to what height, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The general guidelines for a female out there are legitimately at 35, I believe. So these are cancer guidelines to decrease that recurrence rate. So
okay.
So yeah, that's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. But you would, I mean, yeah, that's an excellent question.
Okay.
Before 6 feet tall, somebody that's 6 feet tall with 31.5, or someone that's 4 feet tall, they look a lot different, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is back to the fruits and vegetables. Is it best to purchase organic on some fruits and vegetables? And then also
we're going to touch that.
Okay. And then what about alkaline versus tap water?
As far as, okay, that's a good question. I'll address that. As far as if we're talking about alkaline, as far as decreasing chance of recurrence or decreasing cancer risk at all, there's no validity to that at all. The only thing that alkaline water is really, that I ever recommend it to anybody, our body has a natural ability to make it a neutral environment, okay? It's not going to let you be at an acidic state, and it's not going to let you be at a higher pH state. So our body does it. So drinking these waters and saying we need to be at more of an alkaline, more neutral, is not truth. That's not the total truth. Our body does that. So those waters out there, the only thing that I recommend that is for my patients that have had neck cancer, that have radiation, and that they have radiation burn. I recommend it for people that have GERD, because it's a neutral beverage, and when you drink it, it will neutralize acid with our GI. So I recommend it for those. But as far as in my cancer world, I never recommend it as far as if we're talking about decreased cancer risk or cancer recurrence risk at all. So we don't need to spend that kind of money on that. And even my patients that I recommend it to, Poland Springs, Springtime, and Deer Park are very economical, and they have a little bit higher pH. So
I have a question, Lisa.
Yes.
Yes, when going back to fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
I don't know where I heard this, that when I do a lot of smoothies, but I use the bullet, so I don't juice because I have diabetes.
Sure.
But I was told that it was very beneficial not to take the pits, the seeds out of the apple, but to throw them in the smoothie with the skin of the apple, keep the seed, because there's a lot of nutrients in the seed.
There are some nutrients in that seed, because that's like a baby apple, really. That's almost like a little embryo, basically. but we don't necessarily, it's not harmful.
Okay.
It's not a harmful thing to do, especially you're putting it in the bullet and you're breaking it down. It's not
Right.
harmful at all. It's not a harmful.
I always do that. I was thinking, you know what, maybe, it's not good for the colon, but I don't care. I'm more concerned about my breast cancer right
Yeah,
now.
but that's you just made a really good point, is that, we are all of us are focused, honed in on breast cancer, and sometimes we let our guard down about those other, because
Right.
I've had patients that have had both, so all of these guidelines are safe for everything.
Okay.
All of the cancers. Okay. So putting those seeds, that's perfect and fine. I mean, I don't know what they taste like. I've never tried one. I mean,
You can't even tell.
Right.
They're in there.
I mean,
So I always cut the apple and throw the whole thing in it.
Good for you.
After a
I'm
while.
not sure tried that. I mean, I've never tried it. So good. That's a great advice. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Uh-huh.
Another question, or do you want me to ask you when it's
No,
relevant?
ask. It's better. It's better. We'll do that. Yeah.
Okay. So about the 31.5 inches, is there another good measurement for those who have had belly altering surgery, such as a DIEP procedure, DIEP procedure?
You know what? That's an excellent question, and I do not know the answer to that. I will have to look that one up. I do not.
Okay.
I don't, I was very apprehensive about put this number on there, because I know people will beat themselves up with it. I want you to be healthy. All right. These are just numbers that people will put on. They're guidelines. All right. And so when we talk about the waist, let's talk about how we measure waist circumference. When we measure it, we're not measuring. A lot of times people will get the smallest part of their waist, like they'll go to the smallest part, and hold in. I remember on Dr. Oz one time, and I almost called in because he was telling how to do waist circumference wrong. But what the legitimate waist circumference, what we're talking about here, is we have to find, we measure where our iliac crest is. I'm going to try to do this and don't laugh. But our iliac crest, which is about right here, okay, on myself. And that's where we measure. This is the smallest part here. That's not my number. This is my number. And it's going to be different. It's going to be a higher number because, it's a little bit lower down for most people. I'm long-waisted, so I can have a smaller waist, but then when I really measure it appropriately, how we're talking here, it's going to be a bigger number. All right. What I want, the biggest thing is, if we don't focus on that number, what we focus on is getting some of that adiposity, that mid-size. If we can get inches of that gone, I don't care if you don't hit 31.5. I don't. Weight, if we're looking at weight loss, even as small as a 5% loss, you have better health. You decrease your chance of recurrence of cancer, you decrease cancer risk, period. Your heart is better, your arthritis is better, inflammation is better. So 5%. So if we weigh 200 pounds, 5% of that is 10 pounds. And so that's my first goal. I say everyone lose 5%. At 5%, if you feel great at 5%, though you don't hit all of these numbers that we're talking about, it's okay. It is okay. You, just by losing that 5%, you have better health, better blood sugars, better everything. So that's the first goal. If we were 200 and you say, oh, but I used to weigh 135 and that's my goal. That is a great long-term goal to have, but our short-term goal should just be that quick little 5%. And everybody, it's an attainable thing. And then once you attain that and you feel good about yourself, and then you can go on. And then you're another 5% and then another, and then boom, you're at your goal. All right. So please, please, please don't don't over-focus on that number. Don't over-focus. All right. I know it's hard not to, since I threw it out there. I was really not sure I was going to do that.
Okay, one last question.
I can't take it away. All right, so let's go. So now these are things that we're going to go into some things some guidelines. All right, so this is going to keep us healthy. Red meat consumption, and I think I've mentioned this before, but the American Cancer Society, the guidelines for physical activity and health is that we need to limit that intake of red meat and processed meat. Cancer survivors may also follow this recommendation. These are good recommendations. And red meat, basically, I tell everyone, red meat is anything that doesn't cluck or swim. So it's not chicken and it's not turkey and it's not all the seafood. That's not red meat. But red meat is pork, though they market it very well and say it's the other white meat. But we need to decrease our consumption of those, because those are and do increase our chance of other types of cancers. So our limit to red meat is 18 ounces per week. And that doesn't matter. That's across the board, female, male, 90 pounds, 100 or 700 pounds. It doesn't matter. That's what the guideline is. And so if we think about that, that's 18 ounces of cooked, it's not raw like I'm showing you here. But so if you did a 3 ounce, say you did a 3 ounce hamburger patty, a beef hamburger patty, you did that. If you did 3 ounces a day, in 6 days, you'd be done with your red meat consumption. A lot of my females don't ever meet that, but I do like to mention that because we have husbands generally or boyfriends, and they need to follow that. So you guys both need to be, everyone needs to be that as a healthy family. The processed meats, the least amount of processed meat that you can get in, the better off that you're going to be. Okay. I don't want to say I don't care. It's just processed meats in general. There's a lot of marketing, a lot of labeling that goes on about, nitrate free or not made with any nitrates. And you have to really read between those lines as far as with the chemicals, because if there wasn't a nitrate in there, the meat would really not be this pretty, like this appealing. If this is appealing, like the red meat, it would all be gray and sludge-like. So it has some form of a nitrate in there. It might not be sodium nitrate that they add, but it might be, celery extract, celery concentrate, and those things. Celery has nitrates in it. Some vegetables do have nitrates in them. But if we don't know what the repercussion of taking that sodium nitrate out and putting in a natural, which I don't like that word, but like the celery, we don't know what that's going to do for us years down the line. We'll know in about 10 years, because that's what it takes to show any repercussion of what we're doing now. So just be really cautious of those. If you're one to have, bacon craze, this bacon craze, and it's kind of dying down maybe a little bit, but, and everyone's like, well, I don't eat it with the nitrates in it, but it's still a processed meat, still processed. Yes, Karen, did you have a question? Oh. I thought you were asking me because I can see you. All right, anyway. All right, so that's it with the red meat. Let's just keep the red meat down. We can do chicken, fish. Fatty fish is really recommended, and that's because of the omega-3 fatty acids, which are essential. I will say one little thing about the red meat. If we're going to choose red meat, say beef, go for the grass-fed. The grass-fed, if we think about they're fed grass. And grass has some omega-3s in it. So that beef, if they within our 18 ounce budget a week, that meat will have some omega-3s in it. So it's as long as we're within budget and you're still doing okay, that would where I recommend you spending your meat budget on grass-fed beef.
A question on the meat.
Okay.
Is deli meat, such as turkey breast, considered processed?
Yes. Anything that comes from that deli, anytime you go up to that deli, that's all processed meat. So it's best if we have, and we do have the time. I mean, we can throw in a whole chicken in the oven and cook that down on Sunday and then slice that real thin, or turkey for that matter. A turkey, you can do that and have that turkey breast that way. With these Instapots and these air fryers and all these great gadgets out there now, it's a very easy process to do. So it's a lot of prepping. I mean, I know it's easy to run through the deli. Now I'm saying if you occasionally have a turkey sandwich, it's okay. But if you have a turkey sandwich every day, or, I have a salad that's a chef salad with all the rolled up ham and all the turkey, let's kind of cut back on that. Let's cut that way back. We can do, you can do that same salad and do, tuna on it. You can make extra salmon from the night before, but let's try to really cut back, streamline with the cold cuts.
Okay, what about ground turkey and ground meats? Are those considered processed?
No, that's a very good question. Not processed like that. Excellent question. So ground turkey and ground meats are not, and they do not fit in that category. I'm talking about like they're processed and pressed into form, like you go to the deli, all the deli meats, sausages, bacon, that type of stuff. That's what we're talking about. And if we were going to touch on the ground turkey, ground turkey is great. That keeps us with that. If we eat ground turkey instead of ground beef, that's going to keep us from our budget of 18 ounces from red meat. That will help, that helps save that. But we're going to do ground turkey. We're going to get a leaner form of ground turkey. It doesn't have to be, mean, if you like ground turkey breast, that's fine. I'm just weird. It does weird things to my teeth. But so I do the middle of the line most of the time, and I watch the saturated fats because we're going to mention those on the back end. So sometimes people will think that they're doing better by doing ground turkey, and they are if we're talking about red meat consumption. But it might not be as any healthier if we're just doing regular ground turkey. Because when they do just ground turkey, they throw the whole turkey in, like the skin and everything else. So you can look at ground turkey, and the more white flecks that you see in that turkey are actually, that's the skin, that's the saturated fat that's floating around. Okay, because if you look at the turkey breast, it's this pink, it's just beautiful, there's no flecks of anything in it. So that's what the difference with that. Are you good with that one? Perfect. All right. Okay, sugar, I get this all the time. All right, sugar has not been shown to directly increase any risk of cancer, or cancer getting worse, or feeding tumors, or increase your chance of recurrence. What sugar is non-nutritive, meaning it has 0 nutrients in it. All right, and what do we want? We want nutrients. We want phytonutrients, we want vitamins, we want fiber. So all sugars is calories, and they're delicious calories, I understand that, but they're non-nutritive. So the more of those types of calories that we have, what the correlation is that is we eat more sweets, we tend to gain weight. All right, increased weight, we talked about obesity, increases our chance of recurrence and increase our chance of cancer. So sugar should be cut back. You know, I'm not sitting here like go eat your Twinkies, but anyway, don't do that. But I want you to be mindful of what we're taking in. And that's the key, is mindfulness of this. You know, are you at work and somebody brings in cupcakes or donuts, and oh my gosh, there's donuts in the break room, and everyone just go run and go get a donut just because they're there. I want you to stop and think about it. Is this something, do I really want this donut? Let's try to think about how much sugar is in this donut. It's just calories. I mean, they're good calories. I understand they taste good, but they're just wasted. All right. So the American Institute for Cancer Research puts a cap, or put a guideline as far as with cancer. They're like, all right, we're all human. We all know we eat sugar, but so I'm going to give you a budget. And I like hard numbers like this. I like to know what my budget is, especially with some of these things are not like the healthiest for us. So the goal, it's not a goal, like we don't have, that's a wrong word. I shouldn't have typed that, but the guideline is to have 6 teaspoons of sugar or less per day. And that's added sugar. That doesn't mean sugar that comes from your fruit at all. So we're not going to jump out and throw all of our fruit away, but we are going to look at the labels, because the labels now have a category underneath carbohydrates, and I'll show you how much sugar is in there. And I'll also show you how much added sugar. And that's what we're focusing on, that added sugar number. Okay. So 6 teaspoons a day, which is really 2 tablespoons, which is kind of generous if you think about it. That's a good generous bit, I think. So we need to convert this on a food label, because a food label just shows us grams, and I can't visualize a gram as much as I can a teaspoon. So you just look on the label and it will show you grams. So you take the grams on the label, you divide that number, say it's 10 grams of added sugar, you divide it by 4, and then you're going to get 2.5, which means there's 2.5 teaspoons of added sugar in that product. So all the new labels, they should be coming out, and you will notice that they're the new label. I'm sorry, I don't have one here with me, but you'll know it's a new label because the calorie, the top of the label, it'll show calories, and it'll be in bold, a darker, bold color. I mean, it'll be black, and underneath there, you'll see, it'll say carbohydrates, it'll say fiber, it'll say total sugar, and underneath that category, it'll say added sugar, includes so many grams of added sugar. And that's what we're going to look at. And I want you to look at that on every label that you touch, because there is sugar. We eat more sugar than we ever thought that we did, because there's so much added sugar in so many things. There's added sugar in potato chips. Like, that's not even something that's sweet. So it's hidden in, we know that it's hidden in ketchups. We know that it's, well, I don't know. Do you know that it's hidden in pasta sauces? It's hidden in some of the barbecue sauces. It's hidden in a lot of different places. So we need to look at that on every single label, because those numbers go into your total. So if you have 2 potato chips, and one potato chip says it has 2 grams of added sugar, which doesn't seem like a lot, 2 grams, but if you do the math, that's a half a teaspoon Visualize what a half a teaspoon is, and that's in a serving of potato chips. And those potato chips I'm quoting are the baked Lay's potato chips. So everybody jumped on board with those years ago. I've never liked those things ever, and this makes me like them less and less. But so look at those, because those things, people think since they're baked, they're kind of free. So they eat them, and they're still loaded with calories. And now we know that there's added sugar in. And if you have multiple servings, I mean, if you eat 2 servings of those, it's probably 280 calories. And it's a teaspoon of sugar. I would rather have it with my cupcake. So, all right. So that's just Lisa's thing. All right. So next, any questions on sugar? Because that's a fun one. I always get that. People are like, sugar feeds cancer. Sugar feeds every single cell in our body. Our body takes that glucose, our sugar, the carbohydrate, breaks it down to glucose. That's our fuel. It's a given thing. I just say that the cancer cells are like the bully in the chow line, and they get all what they want, and they leave the scraps for the rest of our healthy cells. That's how I think of it. I think of it that way. So sugar does not make your tumor grow. It does not bring your cancer back. The only thing that sugar can do, it can cause obesity, but it sure can cause dental caries or cavities. Those are the only 2 things that it is known. Okay, proven so far.
And if you have diabetes, then that probably increases your chances of, I don't know, if you feed your body with sugar, wouldn't that affect your whole, metabolism and the way that the cells absorb those nutrients? I don't know. What do you?
As far as diabetes, well, so sugar is a carbohydrate, and when we're diabetic, we focus on carbohydrate counting. So,
okay.
And same thing with, you can have a piece of candy that has 15 grams of sugar, and you can have an apple that has 15 grams of sugar. They're equal. All right. You eat them. Your body doesn't know, oh gosh, this is great. It's an apple. This is 15 grams of carbohydrate. Breaks it down to glucose. Now, what's the difference between these 2 things? Oh, well, an apple, what did I just said? An apple is high in quercetin, is the phytonutrient. So nutrient density, like, there you go. Same carbohydrate load. So when I talk to diabetics, I'm like, I don't care if you eat candy bars for all your carbohydrates. You're not going to be healthy. That's why we don't encourage it. It's the same thing. It's carbohydrate.
Okay.
Carbohydrate. So good question. Yes. All right. Okay, here's our organics, and everyone's gonna get me. This is why I'm on my Zoom. But there's nothing proven. There's no studies in humans to show that organic foods are better than foods that are non-organic in reducing the risk of cancer, reduce the cancer coming back, or the progression. All right. I know that's a big thing to swallow, but I have patients legitimately that will not eat fruits and vegetables because they can't afford organic. So when we think about that, we think about what we're giving up, all those nutrients we talked about, all that plate full of color, all those phytochemicals, because it's non-organic. All right. So you can actually put yourself at greater risk by not eating a non-organic product over organic. Did I say that correctly? What we need to do is we need to wash. Now, it's the pesticides that we're not happy with and we don't want. So we need to wash. We need to wash everything that we put in our mouth. And wash, it doesn't get 100% gone. I understand that, but it's going to get a lot of everything off of it. Even as other people touch it, like right now, this coronavirus is lingering all over, and you get somebody that had it on their hand and they touched your fruit, it just lingers. So we should wash anything regardless. And it doesn't, you don't have to do anything fancy or over the top. They've got all these different cleaners. It's a little bit of, you can do some baking soda, and water, like a little paste. You want to do that like your apples and stuff, wash it that way. If you actually will running water, and you hold that fruit under there, and ABCD, you sing the alphabet, just like when we wash our hands. I wash off watermelon. I cut that. I wash off my bananas. I wash off anything with a peel, even an orange that I peel, because anything that's on the outside of it, and that's not talking about specifically pesticides, but it's talking about germs from everybody else. I just wash it all off. All right. So in the long run, if you can eat organic foods, that's great. If you can afford them, all organic. But see, I don't like when people, go and buy organic cookies. Okay. That doesn't make sense to me at all. All right. If you have a small organic budget, then you do it. You do you. All right. You can do that in your fruits. You can buy, organic milk. You can do the organic eggs, whatever makes you feel more proactive, but it is not a prerequisite, and it has not been proven to have any benefit on the long run. Okay. So let's think about what we're doing if we're avoiding things that are non-organic, or just eating all organic and eating junk. I mean, we can have a totally organic diet and be eating organic Twinkies and Ding Dong. I don't know why I pick on those two things all the time, but I do. So, or we can have organic, chicken nuggets. I mean, so let's just think about that. We'll just process it. Okay.
Hey, Lisa.
Yes.
When you talked about washing the fruits and stuff, is there any value in washing with vinegar versus water?
Oh yeah, you can do that. There's a vinegar. I don't know the ratio, but there's a vinegar spray, vinegar water spray. You can actually do that too. The baking soda works, and the vinegar water. Mm-hmm.
Lisa, I have a sponge, a little. It's like a plastic sponge, and what I do is, my doctor told me to do this, so I don't know how you feel about this.
Okay.
He said, grab like a couple drops of your regular dishwashing soap. Put it on a toothbrush, on a sponge, a brush that you have, and scrub those. And if they're not scrubbable, just make a little bit of soapy water and let your fruit in there, and then rinse all that off. Okay. And that will take everything out. And I was like, are you sure the soap has a lot of stuff in it? And he goes, I'm sure, because you're going to be rinsing it off with water. So I've been doing that. I cut my apples from the tree, and they have black spots. So I grab my sponge, and they actually come out perfect. So
look at you. Well, so I was at a seminar and a lecture. We brought this up. Somebody had brought this same question up, and I used to tell people to do that. A little bit of soap and water, but then we don't know what that soap really does. That was the big controversy at that time. It's great and it does get things off, but is there a residue from the soap, even though we're rinsing it? So, we're trying to take off chemicals, but yet we're putting chemicals back on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I mean, that was my first thought, because I went back and forth with him.
Right.
And I said, well, isn't that, I said, and he's like, no, you'll be fine. Just make sure you rinse it really well. Okay. So here I am washing, but when I'm rinsing, I'm spending like 20 minutes, with the water running. And so anyway.
You know what, you just do 20 minutes without the scrub. Or if you really want to scrub it, take some baking soda, just put it down, tap your brush on that, and scrub.
Okay.
Yeah.
And vinegar, that's a great idea.
I would feel more comfortable you doing that. That's Lisa.
Okay.
That
great.
was a question. What you think about? I mean, just think about it. Like Dawn dish soap. What is that? I don't know. I don't know the chemical structure in that. So I stopped saying that. I mean, it makes sense if it washes the dirt and the germs off of our hands. It would do that for our fruit, but then we're going to eat the fruit.
Yeah.
That's somebody suggested maybe Dr. Bronner's unscented soap, because there's no chemicals in it.
Okay, I didn't know that one. Yeah.
What is it, Dr. Brown's?
Bronner's, BRONNER.
Oh, I'm going to look for it.
Yeah.
You usually find it in health food stores.
Okay,
thank you.
excellent. Good help. All right, so organics. Okay, our fat consumption. I think I was kind of alluding to this. So the low-fat diet can lower your chance of recurrence. So we need to hone in on the fat. Fat is fat. Fat is more calorically dense than a carbohydrate and a protein. So if we have per gram, if we had fat, carbohydrate, and protein sitting together. So if we had butter, we had our protein, and then we had our a carb. So say bread. Per gram, there are four calories per gram of a protein. There are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, but a fat per gram has 9. Okay, so that's why it's calorically dense. It's almost twice as much. It's a little bit over twice as many calories as a carbohydrate and protein. So we need to cut back on fat because extra calories equals extra weight, equals extra adiposity. So, you know, that this whole song and dance type thing. So what we look for mostly, I tell people, is I really recommend that we watch our saturated fat content. And that's on the food label. You look at the food label, total fat, and it'll have trans fat, which trans fats are getting out of our diet, which is joyful, but the saturated fats are still there. So we need to get that number as low as we possibly can. It is comparative shopping. Again, if you have 2 products and one has less saturated fat than the other, obviously that can be, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but it will be a no-brainer now that we get the one with the least amount of saturated fat. Saturated fat is inflammatory, and we don't need inflammation in our body. We're trying to decrease inflammation. We're trying to be calm about it. We're trying to be nice to our bodies. Don't put it through all this rigmarole. So saturated fat should be gone, and our monounsaturated, so like things in our nuts, in our seeds, fatty fish like salmon and mackerel and tuna, they have a higher amount of the monounsaturated of the omega-3. So those are fats that calm things down. They're less inflammatory. They're anti-inflammatory actually. So if we're gonna have fat in our diet, we should pick a fat that has more monounsaturated fats, okay? You know, if someone says, well, they always ask me, I get this all the time, all my career, butter or margarine. And my answers have changed over the years. And, you know, I used to say, oh, it doesn't matter, whatever your taste, and it really is, it's taste. But if we look at a label, and I don't have one, but if we look at a label comparative, if you go to that butter aisle or margarine aisle, and it is like super long, I mean, it is a long aisle, you pick up your butter. I recommend picking up a stick of butter, picking up whipped butter, and then picking your favorite margarines that you use. And then that's what you're gonna do a comparative. Now, I always say just get whipped butter. Whipped butter is gonna have maybe a gram or 2, maybe a gram more of saturated fat than some margarines out there, but it's a taste thing to me. I'd rather have a little bit of something that tasted really good than a lot of something that was subpar. It doesn't do it for me. So the whipped butter obviously is gonna have half of everything than a stick butter because you're paying for air. But if you measure out a tablespoon, which is a very generous portion, we shouldn't be more than a tablespoon of anything like that, that's very doable. And if you have a saturated fat budget, then you know, like, all right, so I get my saturated fat from my half and half in the morning, and I want a whole tablespoon of my whipped butter on this sweet potato I'm eating, or bread that I just baked. All right, so we're going to look for that. The lower the amount of saturated fat, the better. All right, and generally when I meet with my clients, all my clients, I give them a saturated fat budget. I talk about that. I calculate that based on calorie needs. So it's a good number to have. It's a good number to know. And the effects of
olive oil? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
How does olive oil fare with the saturated fats?
Olive oil is very low in saturated fat. It might have 1 or 2 grams, but it is all monounsaturated. Monounsaturated is, if we're gonna list our fats preferable, it would be monounsaturated, then your polyunsaturated, and then obviously saturated fats on the bottom. And those are the bulk of most of the fat in our diet. So monos. So when we have stuff like peanuts, you know, or any kind of nut, there's going to be some saturated fat in there. But how I look at it, say peanut butter is, I think there's, don't quote me, but I think there's 15 grams of fat, or 16 maybe, I don't even know anymore, of grams of fat in that peanut butter, and 2 of those grams are saturated. That means the rest 14 grams are your mono and your polyunsaturated fats. Now, mono and poly do not have to be listed on a food label. That's not required by law. So, you know, those things that have more of the mono and poly, they're going to put it on there. Like you'll read some peanut butters, it'll say this many grams of monounsaturated, this many grams of polyunsaturated. That outweighs, that kind of counterbalances the damage that that saturated fat does. So, but if we look at butter, or if we look at lard, or if we look at some of these margarines, they have 5 grams of total fat, and 3 of those come from saturated fat. That's a higher ratio that way.
Okay.
So that's how you can do comparative shopping as well. I was like, well, what's that ratio? Like, you know, I used to tell people, this is like a math question or math. So if we look at total fat on your label and you divide that number by 2. So say we have a food item that has 10 grams of fat. So we divide that by 2, so that's 5. Just remember that 5. Then we go down and we look at trans fat, and then we look at saturated fat. And so say saturated fat, there was 6 grams, okay? 6 of those 10 grams. So I always go by the baseline. So we had 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's half. Then we have 6 grams of saturated fat, which is more than half. So that tells me that more than half of the fat in that food product is the bad and inflammatory artery clogging fat. So I would say, I don't think so. You know, not today. I don't want that one. All right. Some things that's warranted, like the butter, the whipped butter. I mean, it is all saturated fat. So that's what it's going to be. That's my luxury item. That's where I'm going to spend my saturated fat. But anywhere else that I can eliminate it or take it away, I would completely do that. I would jump on board with that. All right.
Question.
That's very good. I totally got it.
You got it?
Yes.
You mentioned inflammation. Is there a connection between inflammation and cancer? Does inflammation cause cancer or increase the chance of recurrence?
Yes, it does. It does. So these things that we're taking away, that we're watching, like the saturated fats, sugar is inflammatory. I didn't even say that about sugar, but sugar is another inflammatory food out there. So yeah, those 2 things, if we can get a hone in on those, you know, and when I have people, sometimes, a lot of times, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of times people try to do too much at one time. So we need to hone in on eliminating some of the bad and incorporating some of the good. And sometimes it's as simple as like, all right, fruits and vegetables every meal, and watch your saturated fat and sugar. But boom, let's try that for a little bit. And then we can fine tune it and tweak it. But the more inflammation that we have, you know, how is it explained to me is that men and women both get breast cancer. You know, there's women have a lot more estrogen, we have all that. But every month a woman goes through, you know, her cycle. And a lot of times our breasts get engorged, they get inflamed, inflammation every month. So that is something that is a contributing factor. That's why they say if you started your menses later in life, you have a lower chance of having breast cancer, just because you didn't have all that inflammation prior to. So yes, inflammation, we try to decrease it the best that we can. That's why stress causes, you know, like an inflammatory response, you know, surgery, you know, we did radiation or chemo, those are inflammatory. So all that whole time we were inflamed purposely to do a job. But after this, then we just have to hone in and try to get as much inflammation gone in our diet, actually. So that was an excellent question.
So,
Lisa, I'm sorry to be throwing these questions, but you mentioned the estrogen in our bodies.
Yeah.
I about food, I used to eat a lot of soy-based products before my diagnosis.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there's a pill that you take, estrogen,
Uh-huh.
you know, like if you had a hysterectomy to replace your,
Right.
are soy products something that is known to increase the chances of an estrogen-based cancer to come back?
Okay. I think I have, in my next slide might be that one. I think I have one of those slides. If I didn't put that slide in here, I will talk about that. But I think yes, I think that's coming up. I'll answer your question. I think
Lisa, real quick, back to the inflammation.
yes.
One of the questions was, can you explain why does inflammation cause cancer?
Well, it contributes. It doesn't cause, so it contributes. So not one thing can cause cancer, not one. I mean, it contributes. You know, like we think, all right, smokers, lung cancer, but that this is a contributing factor to everything else, all right? We all have cancer cells in our body. We all do. So how I like to visualize or I like to break it down, like when I go talk to like little kids and they ask me, you know, like, what is cancer? So we all have cancer cells. So I tell them it's like a peanut M&M, all right? So your cell is that peanut. And when we eat healthy and we eat good foods, that shell, that hard chocolate shell around the peanut forms. This is so like way down here. And so they like, oh, and then you eat foods that are more saturated, kind of like, they're kind of like bullies, you know, and they come and they're like peck, and they're pecking at that cell to break that beautiful, beautiful protection, all right? So when it breaks that the protective cell or the covering, if it's a cancer cell that nut is, then that cancer cell kind of just, you know, cancer cells they're mutants. They don't know when to stop. They just keep bumping into and keep reproducing. Like a normal cell, it stops reproduction once it touches it like another cell. I can't. So that's what we think about. So the more inflammation that we have on a cellular level, because it happens on a cellular level, the worse off that it's going to be. Okay. So if we can have less inflammation as we take in or be more mindful of everything, that's going to play a role. That is going to play a role. Now, stress causes, you know, is another thing that's kind of like that bully. You know, we can't control out of the stress that gets thrown at us. You know, we can't, but we need to learn how to manage that. And that's not my scope of practice, but we need to learn how to manage the stress, you know, deep breathing exercises, going for a walk, you know, music, and whatever it takes, we need to de-stress. But as far as our diet, we have a lot of say so, because we have a choice of putting a stick of butter in our mouth or a plate full of fruits and vegetables. So that was a great question.
Lisa, I'm sorry, just real quick, because we are running out of time.
Oh, we are.
Please just put the questions on the chat box so Lisa can get through her whatever's left. And then if there's any additional questions that don't get answered, I can provide you guys with Lisa's email and you can ask her. But we definitely want you to get through your...
Oh my gosh, we have 6. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So alcohol, and I don't know if I have the soy one, but I will address that. All right. So alcohol increases the estrogen in our blood. And in theory, what they say is that can put you at risk of the estrogen positive breast cancer. All right. So several studies took place. And so, you know, because I get this all the time, can I go out and have a ladies' night with my friends? And, you know, half of these studies were linked that they had worse outcomes. Half of them didn't have worse outcomes, but they didn't study the diet of each of these people, of each of these subgroups, you know, so they just looked at alcohol consumption. So, you know, we can have a higher BMI and still be healthy. You talk to your doctor really about the alcohol. Your oncologist is the one that I always tell people, you ask them, because one study found that the effects of alcohol may be worse in those people who are overweight and obese and those estrogen positive patients. So you have a good talk with your physician about the alcohol. I always say, I revert back to what your physician says, because they know your cellular, they know what's going on more than I do. Generally, the least amount, the better. If we had any guideline, and the guideline would be across the board, is females are allowed to have 1 drink per day, men 2. Some doctors say 0, so they know what your history is, and they know what your cancer, specific cancer is. So we have to watch out for that. And okay, let me do it the soy thing, because I didn't put that slide in here. I thought I was working on it, but so soy is safe. Soy can actually, we used to tell people to avoid soy just because it has that phytonutrient. It has like an estrogen type phytonutrient in it. But what we didn't know until we know now is some of those phytoestrogens actually are estrogen blockers. So they actually can help tamoxifen. For those of you who are on tamoxifen, they have more of a tamoxifen-like effect. But we're talking about soy in whole foods. So it's soy milk, it's tofu, it is soy edamame, it's tempeh, and we're not talking about supplementation. And so that might answer your question. We don't have the studies on supplementation. Supplements are, you know, if if you think about supplements, it's all processed. It's everything that's completely processed. So, and we're taking one soy, we're missing all the other benefits from that soybean, meaning the fiber, meaning the other nutrients that's in it. So taking a pill, we have done no studies about taking any supplement across the line that is actually beneficial. We do know that taking vitamin D or making sure our vitamin D levels are high is beneficial. So that's something that everybody should know what their vitamin D level is. And then we don't just supplement willy-nilly with vitamin D. We need to know what that level is first. So the biggest thing, the take-home message is to be mindful, because mindfulness can lead to a long, healthy life. I don't want people to stress about the food that they're putting in their mouth. I want them to think about it, but I don't want them to lose sleep about it. I want them to think, did I eat all my fruits and vegetables today? Yes. Okay, great. Did I watch my saturated fat? Yeah. Okay. Did I not go over my budget for sugar? Yeah. Okay. So that's a good day. Did I exercise? That's a big thing. Did I exercise? If you have a bad day, everybody has a bad day. I'm not 100% of the time. I'm not here to tell you that I am. But if I have a bad day, I just jump back on the next day. Or if I have a bad meal, everybody's allowed to have a bad meal. So just be mindful about it and don't beat yourself up. That's the biggest key. All right. Any other questions? Let me get to this last. All right. Anything else?
Just a second. There was one, somebody asked about flax seeds. Is there a recommended daily dosage, like 5 teaspoons? I heard too much can be bad. Also, have you read that eating too many black beans and chickpeas are not recommended for ER positive breast cancer thrivers?
As far as flaxseed, I would have to look up it's just a serving. A serving is I'd have to look up that serving. Chia seeds, no, there's no upper limit. I haven't heard of any ill repercussions from too much. I mean, if you ate
Chickpeas.
Chickpeas. Oh, chickpeas or any of those. Okay. You would have to eat a quantity that's quite large to have any ill benefit of that. And I don't like, that's a whole food. That is a whole food. That is a fiber content in food. They have a lot of good nutrients in them, and I don't like people to avoid those. When we find something like, anything, we can pick on and anything, but anything we don't go overboard. So all the artificial sweeteners that are out there for my diabetic cancer patients, and they're worried about them, in all reality, you would have to consume a whole case of Diet Coke in a day to even start having any issues. So a little bit is okay. It's that mindfulness, legumes are immensely healthy for us. So no, we don't need to limit those. And the research hasn't, I have not come across any of that as far as keeping our consumption down.
Okay, we have time for.
Sorry, Aurelis.
Go ahead. This will be the last question. Sorry, we go ahead.
Canned foods. Thoughts on canned foods? Canned vegetables and things like that.
Okay. That they do lose their nutrient value. They're higher in sodium. All right. So it's an individualized thing, basically. Obviously, fresh fruits and vegetables are on the top, but as opposed to frozen a lot of times can have more nutrients in it, depending on where you live. You both frozen and they get picked at the same time. One gets harvested and goes to like Green Giant and gets flash frozen, and the other one goes to like the public warehouse and gets processed, and then it goes to their distributors, and then it goes to the store, and then it sits in back in the refrigerator, and then it sits on the shelf, and then it could be 3 weeks before you get it. And the frozen stuff sometimes is taken from point A to point B, flash frozen, and put in the freezer. So sometimes, especially in the winter time, when you can't get a lot of the fresh, frozen is better. Now, the things that we say, I say, yeah, let's get some canned stuff. Tomatoes you can always keep those on hand canned. All your legumes that we just talked about, so black beans, black-eyed peas, lima beans, garbanzo beans, are good and canned. I always say get low sodium, just for better health, and keep those. But as far as all the other vegetables, they have the least amount of nutrient value in them, and they have a lot of sodium. And so that sodium is detrimental to a lot of people. So we have to watch that. Well, those other
Thank you,
things are
Lisa.
fine. Okay.
We have a few more questions. I'll just get those emailed to you separately. I just, obviously it was very engaging, obviously a topic that is helpful because we had a lot of questions and feedback. So we appreciate obviously Lisa's time. We thank you guys for your support and for joining us. As a reminder, this will be posted on our YouTube channel and our Facebook channel. I will make sure that everyone that registered, you will receive a survey, and that survey will have the link where you can access the video from today. And then also if my contact information will be on there as well. So you can reach out to us. You can make private appointments, one-on-one appointments with Lisa. Just reach out to Turning Point, reach out to us, and that we will make sure to get that appointment set up. And also, just as we always remind everyone, Turning Point is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're able to provide these education events free of charge because of donations, because of donors. So if you guys appreciated the information and you wish to make a donation, just go to myturningpoint.org and you can donate there any amount. We would greatly appreciate it. So thank you for your time today. So just look for the survey and it'll have the contact information there.
Until next month, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You're welcome.